Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to take a look at the San Francisco Shock roster going into the 2021 season. The returning Grand Finals champions finished the season with the third best record in the league. And so here is the team we're going to take a look at and talk about and see if they have a roster that is capable enough to repeat as champions for a third straight season. So let's jump in and start with the first of the three roles. We have the damage players. They have 4 on this team. Of course, we just had on Friday the announcement that Ants would be retiring for health reasons. He has moved on from the Overwatch League and is no longer with the team, but they are left with Striker and Tayo, who were both on this team last season. Of course, Rascal also released to free agency earlier in the offseason. So, only 2 returning DPS players with Striker and Tayo, but 2 new DPS players in Nero, formerly of the Guangzhou Charge, and Glister, formerly of the London Spitfire. I think this is a very solid DPS group here. I would expect Striker to still be the mainstay player. I think he is going to be the player who gets most of the playtime of all these DPS players. He's very good. He's very proficient, especially as Tracer. And if Tracer is still a mainstay hero like she has been somewhat recently, and even in the past, I think we'll still see a ton of Striker. What's interesting is Striker is very similar, not in the most similar, but there are some similarities between what Striker is known for and what Glister is known for. I think Glister is going to be the dedicated Widowmaker player here, most likely. Striker does have a Widowmaker, which is pretty good, but it is not his most notable hero. His most notable hero is his Tracer. Glister, on the other hand, also known for his Tracer play, but also a lot of his McCree and his Widowmaker was kind of what gave him his best performances this past season with London. So in those double hit scan metas, definitely going to see a lot of Striker and Glister. Tayo could maybe play a bit in some of those situations, though I don't expect it because he was brought in primarily to be a flex DPS player on that Genji. Nero is, I think, the main flex DPS player for this team. Very much known for his Pharahs, his Genjis, his Hanzos, his Meis. His Doomfist kind of, he didn't play it a ton down the stretch in 2019, but he would pull it out every so often. So he is a very good player. And I think that Nero brings a ton of consistency to that flex DPS role. So I think it's going to be an interesting team here. Nero kind of has the most unique of the hero pools. I think that where Tayo's got a bit of a blend between some of the hitscan DPS and flex DPS in his hero pool, Nero is very much your dedicated flex DPS player, and he's kind of the only one who's like solely a flex DPS player. So I expect to see a ton of Nero this season. Genuinely, I think he is a very good player. I think he's going to be a very, very, very big name for this team, and I think he's going to be kind of the key to their DPS lineup. But I think this is a very good lineup. Tayo is a player I'm very interested in seeing what he does going forward, just because he didn't get a ton of playtime late in the season or down the stretch. He was brought in someone late in the season to kind of fill in some of those holes that they had after the Summer Showdown when they lost to the Florida Mayhem, or not Florida Mayhem, Paris Eternal. So I think that Tayo was brought in from to be a Genji player, and I think he's kind of the project for this team. There's no new rookie signings this season for the Shock, but Tayo is someone who was brought in the middle of the season last season, so I would expect him to kind of be that kind of quote rookie player who I think we're going to have to see a ton of growth and a lot of work in the offseason to kind of get him to his full potential, reach his peak. But he is a player I'm very excited to see perform in this group that they have here. But I think it's a very, very good group. I think this is one of the best DPS cores in the league. I think it's the best DPS lineup on paper and in terms of name value. These are four big names, well-known players, all of whom have proven themselves time and time again in the Overwatch League. So I think that is really the thing to look out for. And I think that this is going to be a very dangerous team, especially with these four DPS players being as good as they are. They don't really have a weakness. There's not really a hole. There's a bit of overlap between, like I said, Striker and Tayo and Glister. But ultimately, I really don't see a major weakness on this team. And that's something that I think is going to be huge going forward for this team. And their success is going to determine really how much value they get out of these DPS players. And I think that the fact that they have as many as they do, I think 4 is kind of a really sweet spot. I think it's kind of the magic number because it gives you the ability to kind of put your 2 best in, and you can kind of let some of your other ones specialize a little more. And I think that it was kind of what benefits some of these teams. I think part of why the Paris Eternal were so successful, for example, in the Summer Showdowns, because they could specialize in that Genji play with Sparkle. And it was something that every meta, it's so much easier to adapt to every meta and be meta-proof when you have 4 DPS players, when there's that many damage heroes in the game. So I think really the Shock have nailed building this DPS core to be so good. And so that's something I think is going well and doing very well. I'm unable to speak somewhat, but very excited to see this DPS lineup. Moving on to the tank line, no changes here from this past season. You still have Super and Smurf as your tanks, or your main tanks. Smurf, of course, mainly known for his Orisa and Winston play, especially his Winston play. And Super is pretty good on that Reinhardt, you know? You know, he's all right on the hero. He's not bad. It's something he knows how to play somewhat well. Choi Hyobin, of course, still this off tank. This is a very good tank line. This is like the best tank line in the league, arguably. They're one of the few teams that has really kind of figured out how to work in different main tanks, how they get the main tanks to synergize with each other. Very, very good and an incredible lineup here with, you know, Choi Hyobin being a 2-time role star, the only player in the Overwatch League to be a 2-time role star on that tank role in back-to-back seasons. He is a very, very good player, and you pair him with 2 incredible main tanks, a Super and Smurf. This is an unstoppable tank line. I think it's so good and it's hard to stop. I feel very good about it. I think that this is a team that will find a ton of success still, just because of how solid this tank line is, and every team in the league would be pretty jealous of that tank line. Finally, the support line, the same 2 flex supports, both returning to this team, Violet and Twilight. I think this is an incredible flex support duo here. They can run double flex support very well. If they need to run Bap Zen, Bap Ana, Zen Ana, whatever it is, they have the players to run it. They have the personnel to run it. I think that these are 2, like arguably these are the best 2 flex supports in the Overwatch League, and they're on the same team. So, you know, that's saying something. That's saying a lot. And you know, if you remember the Countdown Cup finals in NA, Twilight on the Ana was just obliterating the Fusion. I mean, he was cleaning the Fusion up. He was just going on flanks, throwing down the bio-nades, and it was all so next level, dude. I mean, he is an incredible player, and I think that him getting more playtime in the future is something I'd like to see. It's interesting to see him kind of sitting behind somebody when he's as talented as he is, but Violet is also very good and has shown to be one of the best in the league. He is a role star from 2020, so still a very good duo here. Moth, of course, has departed this team, so they do not have him on their side any longer as their main support, but instead they have acquired FD God, formerly of the Paris Eternal, another role star player. Of course, main support, best known for his Lucio, incredibly aggressive Lucio playstyle, very good playmaker on the Lucio. I think FD God is going to be incredible for this team. He's definitely a different player than Moth. You know, Moth I think was more kind of stable, not as flashy, not as playmaky in the way that FD God kind of goes for these big plays, somewhat aggressive type of play style. Moth could get the plays, but usually he got the plays from setting up with the team and coordinating and communicating. He was the leader for this team, or he was a leader for this team. I don't know if FD God is that type of player. I don't know if he's a leadership figure, if he's a shot caller or anything like that. I don't know exactly. But I think it'll be a noticeable change in the way that this team plays, with FD God coming into the structure and losing a player as talented as Moth and as important to the way this team plays or played as Moth. I think it's going to be a weird transition for a lot of people to see this team go from being the very well-known, popular American player in Moth to FD God. But I don't think that there's a talent decrease. I think that FD God is incredibly talented. He wouldn't be a role star from 2020 if he weren't a talented player. He just has a different type of skill set, a different type of play style. It'll take adapting. It'll take a change in the way this team plays together. But you're being coached by Krusty, right? You're being coached by the best coaching staff in the Overwatch League, and depending on who you ask, one of the best coaching staffs in all of esports. So I think it's very important to see what FD God does for this team and how successful he is. Because like I said, this is a team that did not add any new rookies. They brought in a bunch of veterans in free agency. FD God, Nero, and Glister. So they bolstered their roster not by going to find project players, really. It was, we're going to find really good, really talented players from across the Overwatch League. We're going to bring them into our team. We're going to integrate them. We're going to build this team new. We're going to build this team in a different way, in a different direction. Change the way we play a little bit, but ultimately still be one of, if not the most talented teams in the league. And we've seen this roster find tons of success. There's obviously some questions, potentially, that people may look at and say, well, you're bringing in a French player, right, to play alongside some Korean players and some non-French players, and so how is that going to work? Are they going to kind of mesh? Are they going to get along well? You know, he's the only European player on this roster. Everybody else is either from Korea or the U.S. Or Japan with Tayo. So there are definitely some questions and things that people may ask and may look at and say, well, how good is this team going to be with these changes? But ultimately, I think that you have to put your faith in Krusty, right? This is a roster that has been successful numerous times. They have won 2 different grand finals, back-to-back grand finals champions. That doesn't just happen randomly. That happens because of talent, and it happens because of good coaching, and it happens because of a strong organization and strong management. And we've seen that from the Shock time and time again. They wouldn't go after players they didn't believe in. It's just not the way that the Shock. They have shown themselves to be a very, 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 very strong competitor and a very strong team. So I think this Shock roster is still one of the favorites, if not the favorites, to win the season in 2021. The talent that they've lost has been replaced in roughly equal fashion, I would say, across the board. Something I found very interesting was in a recent episode of his show, Dogman, aka Dustin Bowerman. He basically was going this whole thing where he said that he thinks Rascal, part of the reason why Rascal isn't in the league right now is because he's not really as good as what people were kind of led to believe, right? Like, they needed a Genji player, and Rascal wasn't the one playing Genji, and they brought in Tayo instead, and while down the stretch we saw more Rascal Genji, he didn't play a ton in the playoffs, and he didn't play a ton later on, and he's not on a team right now, so maybe Rascal has been falling off a bit, or something like that. I thought it was an interesting point of view and perspective from Dogman, and something that I think is very interesting to think about and to consider about. Maybe this team actually might be better off with Nero than it was with Rascal, or maybe and it's better off with Tayo than it was with Rascal. Maybe that is kind of the big change to this team. Maybe Krusty sees more potential and more overall just strength with those two players than they did with Rascal. So I am curious to see kind of how this team performs with these changes, and if these changes are somewhat noticeable. So it is very nice to see some of these players get kind of moved to teams. It's interesting to see the Shock evolve to become more of this Western team. I personally was kind of looking at the direction of the Shock, and it felt more like they were going to be very Korean. That last season they add aunts, they get rid of Nevix. Then you see Sinatra leave, and you start to kind of look at the team. You're like, well, they're going, kind of somewhat heavy Korean. So it's nice to see a bunch of players be brought together to kind of make this very clear mixed roster super team, really. And I think this is a very good Shock roster. I 100% have them as one of my favorites, if not my favorite. I don't want to jump too much of an early gun, because I am going to have power rankings, and things may change between now and the start of the season, whenever it does start. So those are the things that I am looking out for, paying attention to, especially curious about, is seeing how much we see change about this team going forward. I don't expect it to be a ton. I think it'll be mostly the same. I don't really see why they would change a lot. And I don't think other teams are going to be able to do much, in my eyes, to catch them up to this roster, but it is possible, and it is something that I have been considering. But I would love to hear from you, your thoughts on this Shock roster. Do you think they're going to be close to as good as they were last season? As good as they were last season? Better than they were last season? Do you think they're going to see a significant dip? Do you think that the other teams in the league, the other rosters in the league, have caught up to this Shock roster and have made it where they're not this super untouchable team like a lot of people thought they were going into last season, even though they didn't end up with the best record in the league? I'm curious what you think. Do you think this team is capable of the three-peat, or do you think this is a team that is getting way too much attention, getting overblown, and is not going to perform the way that everybody thinks it will? I would love to hear from you, your thoughts on it, but that is all from me. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. I'm going to get out of here. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.